This time I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company Board of Directors. And a reminder that we are going to have a audio recording of this meeting, and we will start with roll call. And Mr. Anderton.
I am here.
Okay, Annalise Kohler.
Present.
And Tanny Stephenson is present, and Tom Hansel will not be present today. And we will go on to the first order of business, which is election of officers for this year. And I will say I did reach out to Tom, and because I always think it's rude to nominate somebody when they're not there, even though it's fun, you know. But I did ask him, and he said if he would be willing to serve as president again, unless we had a different direction that we wanted to go. So I'll put that out to you guys.
Well, I'll nominate Tom Hansel to be the president again for one more year.
I'll second that.
Okay, are there any other nominations for president? Okay, we will close the nominations and vote on Tom Hansel. Everyone signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, there we go. He's in. Okay, and then the next one would be Secretary Treasurer, correct, Wendy? And I am in that role presently. And don't know what you guys would like to do there, so we'll just open that up.
Tanny, are you interested in continuing to serve?
I would be willing to do that, yes.
Ken, how do you feel?
I feel like Tanny's done an awesome job, and if he's willing, I'd love to have him continue that role.
Okay,
Okay. I nominate Tanny to serve as secretary and treasurer.
And I'll second that.
okay. Any other nominations? None. All in favor? Okay. All in favor of Tanny Stephenson for Secretary Treasurer, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, done. All right, thank you. And now we will move on to fixed billing with Miss Lori Baker.
Thank you. Wendy, can I share my screen, please?
Should be good now, Lori.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you all see my slides?
Yes.
Great. So good morning. In your meeting packet today, you have a number of documents that provide further information regarding the proposed fixed fee for MCDD maintenance and administrative services. So today I'm going to just walk you through that packet and then answer any questions that you may have. We'll be asking for your consideration to approve the fixed fee today. I do want to note that we're presenting this information at each of the individual district board meetings this week, and we'll only proceed with the fixed fee if all districts approve. All right, so here's the list of the documents we'll be reviewing today. You'll see that I'm starting from the back of the packet with attachment 6. And I'll work my way forward through the documents. I'll also note that in the packet you received includes information for all of the districts, so you can see the calculations and dollars associated with each district. All right, here is attachment 6. This starts on page 53 of your packet, and it contains the document that has all of the questions that we received from the board members from all of the districts and the related answers to those questions. Attachment 5 starts on page 50 of your packet. And this is a template board financial report. So you can see our proposal of the reporting for the fixed fee. In the blue highlighted section, you'll see a line added for levy and drainage system maintenance fixed fee. And in the yellow highlighted section, you'll see a line added for the administrative fixed fee. Administrative costs are currently included in the contracts and agreements line on the financial reports. All right, this is attachment 4. This is a pretty large quantity of numbers. And in the following slides, I'm actually going to walk you through each of these colored sections so that you'll know what information is included in each section of this. This information then feeds into the calculation of the fixed fee. All right, so here's the blue section. So the blue columns include all of the expenditures for each district. So for fiscals 2016-17 through 2020-21, these numbers are taken from audit or review reports. So these are all of the finalized reports for each of the fiscal years. The 21-22 numbers are unaudited, but I will note that the staff costs that are used in the fixed fee calculation are final. And so those won't change. The 22-23 budget numbers align with the budgets adopted by the district boards. The green section in that big statement shows all of the costs that are related to the fixed fee calculation. These costs are reported in 2 lines on the financial report. Regular maintenance costs are included in the levy and drainage system maintenance line, and administrative costs are included in the contracts and agreements line. So for the maintenance costs, we've reviewed each year and we've removed any of the costs that would not be included in the fixed fee. So we've been able to identify just those activities that are fixed fee related. And you'll see why that's important when we start to look at the calculation. And then the gray section is everything else. So these are the things that are not included in the fixed fee. And if you like math, blue minus green equals gray. All right, here's the interesting part. This I call my rainbow schedule. So this is the calculation of the fixed fee. And I'm going to walk you through each of these colorful boxes so that you know what exactly this information is. Attachment 3, which is what this information is starts on page 46 of your packet. So in the blue square, you'll see the maintenance and administrative costs that are for services included in the fixed fee. So these are the numbers that come directly from that green section in the financial detail report that we reviewed in the previous attachment. In the yellow square, you'll see that we've calculated the percent change for each year. So we calculated the percent change for maintenance costs. We calculated the percent change for administrative costs and for total costs. For those who want to check the math, in the orange box, you can see the percent change in total costs for 2017-18. This is calculated by taking the total cost of 2017-18 of 165,100. So if you look over here in the blue section, that 165,100 minus the 2016 total costs of 189,251. And taking that difference divided by the 189,251 comes up with the percentage change, which was for that year a decrease of 12.8%. In the green box, you'll see that we did calculations for both a 5-year compound average growth rate and an average growth rate. There had been some discussion at the last meeting that there could be some differences in calculation depending on the fluctuation of the numbers. So we did both. What we pushed forward into the calculation was the lower of the two. So for SDIC, that's the 5-year compound annual growth rate. Easy for me to say, right? We also took a look at each individual change to see if it was more beneficial to the districts to use individual change in maintenance costs and individual change in administrative costs to come up with a fixed fee calculation. What we found is when we used the total cost calculation, it was actually the lowest cost for the district. So that is the calculation that we used, which is in the purple box. So in the first line in the purple box for 22-23, that's your budget dollars that are related to fixed fee activities. And then for 23-24 and 24-25, we've extended those budgeted dollars by the 8.6%, the compound average growth rate. In the red box, you'll see we've allocated that fixed fee to the 2 different areas. So we've allocated based upon a percent allocation between maintenance and administrative costs. This allows us to continue to do your financial reporting with the correct classifications of the expenditures. I'm going to stop here because that was a lot of information. So are there questions about this calculation or the strategy that we used here that you'd like to ask at this point?
Okay. No?
No?
Do you have
All
questions?
right. I'll keep going.
Wait,
Seems
so
very
wait,
straightforward,
wait.
Lori. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm going to keep going and then I'll get to your questions, Tanny, if that's okay.
sure.
Okay, so here we have attachment 2, which is on page 44, and this is a sample listing of the services included and services excluded from the fixed fee. I'll also note that the IGA includes a list of the services included. And I know there had been some questions about, well, what does it mean to have to pull a permit for a project? And so this list gives you some examples of those sorts of things that would be services not included. And it's usually the things that we pull permits for are those larger capital projects. All right, attachment 1 is the red line version of the IGA. It starts on page 7. There are red line versions of the IGA for every district in your packet, as well as the most recently approved Appendix B to the IGA, so that you can see the full document all together. And we're to the end. So at this point, I can take any questions that you may have about the calculation or the strategy behind the fixed fee. And I will stop sharing so that I can see everybody's faces.
Okay.
So are there questions?
Okay. I guess I'll go. I have a couple.
Sure.
Okay, on page 65 of the packet where we're doing the question and answer piece from the prior meeting.
Mhm.
On the bottom of that, under the answer, it talks about the ability to revert back to a direct billing. I didn't see that in the IGA.
On an annual basis, we do an amendment to the IGA that has the rates. And at that point would be on an annual basis would be the point that the board would choose to revert back to a regular calculation of the fixed fee, because that Appendix B actually has all of the language in it related to the fixed fee and the services. So, and we take a look at that on an annual basis because we update the rates annually. So I believe that that is the concept behind that, is that we would take a look at it every year. We've put 3 years worth of fees into
Right.
the red line IGA, but with us looking at that appendix each year, that would be your opportunity to
revert.
take a
if
look
you
at
were
that
going to.
methodology.
Okay.
Mhm.
Brian,
Hey, how you doing?
good.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, thanks for the presentation, Lori.
Sure.
So looking at that, I mean, looking in Appendix B and Appendix A there, I mean, but we're talking about the main body of the IGA here, payment for work performed, Section 2A.
Mhm.
That doesn't talk about any reverter back there. I mean, that talks about fixed annual fees and it's got the amounts there. So when Tanny's talking about the off ramp there, there's no off ramp. I mean, I understand that you're talking about revising Appendix B there for the hourly rates for the different kinds of services there, but we've still got the fixed fee in there with the fixed amounts there in Section 2A. I mean, I think that's what he's talking about, and just trying to square that up with the way that question was answered, along with what's actually in the IGA.
Sure. Well,
Yeah, I would agree. There's no express reversion in the proposed amended IGA language. But I think as is with anything, the districts can renegotiate every year to revert back if it wanted to. So
Oh, I agree. I think there's a little bit of unequal bargaining power too, when it comes to if MCDD wants to go forward with that. I mean, given that you're doing
yeah, this is and we laid out just for the 2 years. So
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I understand that. And so, I mean, to the extent that there's an off ramp there, I don't see it. And so the way that question sort of answered, I didn't identify that as consistency with what was presented forward.
Good point, Brian. I
Good
did
point.
not catch that myself.
Okay.
So,
We maybe
All right.
look at doing something collaboratively with that, so where we can get something in there that would work.
wait, so yeah, it would have to be an amended version of this proposed amendment. And yeah, it would include in that 2A a provision that could be reverted back should there be, should there be an agreement. So it's something we can propose. We've already have 2 boards that this would be the last board. So Lori,
Correct.
we would just have to work with the other 2 boards to propose that amendment. And I think the because we can make the argument that because it's in the the question and answer section, that there is an inversion, but that it isn't expressed in the IGA, that could be just a minor change to the proposed amendment that hopefully Penn 1 and Penn 2 would agree to. And I don't know why they wouldn't as a board, because it is protective of them.
Reasonable people.
Yeah, so this, we could chalk this up as a drafting error, because we did address it in the fact that there's a reversion when in fact there isn't in the express IGA.
That works.
Does that sound good for people? Brian?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, as long as things sort of sync up and that's what the board wants to do. I mean, that's
Well,
a direction that I'm comfortable with.
I
It'll get-
doubt that the other boards are going to object to this
it'll
I
get
doubt it.
tweaked
change.
and
It will
right.
be, it's considered in my opinion, considered a minor change, because thank you for pointing it out that it is in fact, the fact section that there would be a reversion provision, and there isn't.
And then this is probably a question for Bill Owen. As I was going through this at 2 o'clock this morning, sorry. One of the things I noticed is tow drains, and I didn't see those listed in the service provided section. But they're listed under the Title 33 items under levy maintenance. So would that, how would that work? Would they need to be listed in the
So-
service provided section?
Yeah, to be frank, I haven't been as engaged in this topic to date. So
You lucky guy.
I need to connect back up with Lori and Hong maybe after this meeting, just to
Okay.
make sure that there's some clarity there.
And I had a question when we talk about things that need permits. Like, whose permits are there? And like, I mean, are we talking like a 408? Are we talking a city permit or county permit? I'm just wondering, things that require a permit are in a different section, like what requires a permit?
Yeah, and Ben can correct me, or even Bill, my understanding is including a local permit, whether it's federal, state, or local for that work. So for example, if you're doing maintenance work, clearing out a ditch, that constitutes construction under either a local stormwater or a DEQ stormwater requirement that you have to get a permit to manage the sedimentation, that would fall under that category of getting a permit. Why? Because it takes some work to try to chase that down and negotiate with the district, with the agency for that work. So it's more particular.
Okay. And so like anything that requires a permit would fall into that class.
Yes.
Okay.
That would be the project. It would fall out of the flat fee administrative service and into I believe, schedule or appendix B based on times and materials.
Okay.
And Ben, please confirm if I'm right about that with respect to the conversation you've had with the ops team.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. I think you characterized it well.
So I was just thinking like, do we have a lot of erosion where we have to put some riprap or something in to shore something up?
Yeah, Tammy, I think the scenarios are more aligned with some dredging work that we
Okay.
might do
Okay.
along roadway ditches, or even Salmon Creek itself.
Okay, thanks. That totally makes much more sense to me. Okay. All right. So with that, so we're gonna make an amendment to this thing and, okay. Awesome. All right. So I guess we were, and board okay with that? That work? Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't I try, let's see if I know how to use the chat. Maybe what we could do is I can put in the chat here on the proposed resolution with the proposed amendment to include the express reversion provision. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
Thank
All
you.
right, this is a lawyer at work right here.
Thank you, Hong.
I'm typing. All right, here we go. When John Roberts was appointed as the Supreme Court Justice back a few years ago, there was a lot of profile on him as being the great lawyer, great legal minds, and all the action photos of him was of him at a book or with a pen writing. That's the action photo of lawyers. There you go. That's all we do. Brian, are you okay with that clause?
Let's see, provided the IGA is revised to include an express reversion clause. I mean, obviously I like to see what the reversion clause is, but I think that if we can get that put together.
I will send it to you.
Okay.
I will send it to you.
All right.
Are you good then?
All right. Well,
Mr. Schultz?
and if once I see that, and if there's anything that I've got an issue with, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you just won't sign it as to form, so we will have failed in our job.
All right.
Thank
so
you.
does someone want to make that motion then at this point?
I move to adopt resolution 2022-09-01, amending the district service IGA with MCDD, providing that the IGA is revised to include an express reversion clause.
And I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right.
Yeah, I just appreciate being flexible and listening to changes.
Yeah, I want to, say thank you to MCDD staff who has spent a fair amount of time with myself and our lawyers and our finance people at Metro just to make sure that we understand what is happening here. I really appreciate all of your time and dedication to those conversations. And Tanny, thank you for reaching out about the kind of last minute changes and did we all have enough time to review this, and for flagging that more discussion was maybe needed at the format meeting for this. I appreciate that.
You bet. Thank everybody. Thank you all. It's all working together. Wendy, do you want to call the roll on that?
I will. Tanny Stephenson,
Yes.
Annalise Kohler,
Yes.
Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. All right, cool. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Wilcox. There he is.
Sorry. Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
Looking forward to telling you a lot of new great things. I'm going to let Jamie kick me off or get things started.
Yeah, I don't want to kick you off, Mark. I want you here.
Oh, you're welcome to present all this.
Hi, everybody. Jamie Kamen with Kearns and West. Mark and I are the PMLS team. We've come before you before talking about updates about the Portland Metro Levy System project with the Corps. And we are here to talk with you about real estate. Mark's going to do all the heavy lifting on this presentation. But before we get started, I just want to have us look at the 18-month timeline. If you want to go to the next slide, Mark. This is the same timeline that we've put in front of you every time we've come. So there should be no surprise. You'll notice the first 4 columns are grayed out, and that's because those are things that we have completed in bringing presentations to you and having conversations with you. And so here we are in now here it is, the first day of fall of 2022. And you'll see we've got this real estate 1 conversation. That's what we're here to talk with you about today. So it's an overview of the real estate plan, the timeline, the elements, the analysis of the district work during the design, during PED, and a draft gap analysis. And then we'll be coming back to you a little bit later with more detail as this progresses, but this is really, consider this your foundation and your introduction to the real estate part of this project. So Mark, was there anything else you wanted to cover in terms of just laying a foundation before we jump into the presentation?
I think the only thing I would add is that, of course, you can see there fall 2022. We're going to have a little bit of refinement. We're going to have more information on our gap analysis, and I'll talk a little bit more about that during the presentation.
Yeah, and before we jump into the presentation, board, are there any questions about where we are in the timeline or what we're planning on talking with you about today? Not seeing any.
Go ahead.
All right, go ahead, Mark. It's all yours.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jamie. Some of these slides you have seen in the past. It's been a while since we talked to you about this subject, but so I'm going to give a little bit of review, but probably won't go into a ton of detail unless you have specific questions. So if you look at the timeline below, this is a rough core slide with a big overview. Obviously, most of you understand that we are at the sort of in the limbo between the feasibility phase and the PED phase, and I'm going to talk about that timeline here briefly. But we are working on refining our real estate portfolio, and I'm going to go into some more detail about that and when various funds or resources are required. This is sort of milestones based on when money is expected to drop, and I'm going to clarify when that money, where that money is expected to come from, refresh you on that. As it stands, I think Evan's kept everyone up to speed on where we're at with PED funding. We expect the PED is in both House and Senate bills and President budgets. So we expect to be on track to start PED funding. The reason that says spring 2023, when the federal fiscal year starts in October, is obviously the way the federal government has worked in recent decades. The money doesn't get approved typically on time, usually continuing resolutions and that sort of thing. And so this is our best guess, sometime between February and April, we'll receive money for PED funding, at which point we will negotiate the PED agreement, and you will be involved in that process and get updates on what the scope for the PED agreement looks like. And then we'll roll right into PED and start to do all the great things that lay the foundation, the survey and those other things. The cost there is the cost that we've advertised, 5.6 million. We put an approximate sign on that because, as you all know, our economy and inflation has has been in flux, and so you know but that is still the number that we're working with. And obviously when we talked to you previously about PED funding, that was on the context of the Oregon State, the Business Oregon State Levy Grant funds, and the district's share will be the cost share for a state levy grant fund. So that'll be greatly taking the wind out of that $5.6 million number. The next major money drop as we move through PED will not be until real estate acquisition begins. So we'll go through PED and we'll design the project, and then towards the end of that process, when the footprint of the project is nearly perfected, then the Corps will issue us a notice to proceed letter that tells us to go forth and start to acquire this. And obviously that'll also be contingent upon the groundwork being laid for a successful construction agreement. And we're all still in lockstep, and that we're getting ready to sign a project partnering agreement or construction agreement. And so there will be no risk of things changing or the project not being put into place. Obviously, also contingent upon that will be federal authorization and funding for construction. So, but that will occur around summer 2025 if PED goes to plan. And that $13 million number is approximate. That is the total cost of the real estate package, including 35% contingency. And so the real number is probably closer to 10 million. And that is throughout the 4 districts. And the first phase is what we'll be focused on as we start the real estate acquisition. And that will be for, currently the Corps has laid out, as anticipated, that phase 1 will be the Penn 1 railroad embankment work. Phase 2 is much of the work in MCDD and SDIC, the cross levy in MCDD, as well as pump stations, the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company pump station, and all the levee work on the northern side of Sandy, as well as in the southeast corner near the Troutdale Outlet Mall. So I'll have better numbers for you that kind of capture when real estate acquisition, what those costs will be by phase. We just got some of that online, and so we'll show you how those distribute later. When the project partner agreement is in place, there is a minimum cash payment of 5%. However, as we've told you in the past, PED costs are credited towards the project partnering agreement. And so that minimum 5% cash payment will be lower. Now, that being said, that is, as we've said in the past, that is not, we anticipate that being paid for by the new urban district and not by the individual districts. So, and then finally, then we expect construction to begin after the bidding of that. And that's the big chunk of money. And that'll be for all the relocations throughout the project, and all the real estate and the relocations and other LERDS costs. Those we will get credit for, and that will be our 35% cost share. So there's not much in terms of direct funds being sent to the Corps. We'll be doing all this necessary work that is sort of statutorily and policy-wise all put on the non-federal sponsor. And this project is unique in that the LERDS cost, which includes the real estate and the reconstruction of facilities, all that is such a large share for this project that it consumes most of our local cost share. So there's very little money handed directly to the Corps after PED. I'm just going to let that soak in for a second, see if there's any questions. I think this is all review, but it's been a while. Okay, looks like you guys have absorbed that, retained that all well. So, this slide, the purpose of this slide is just to show that the core is, the core policy really puts a lot of the real estate acquisition, real estate activities on the non-federal sponsor. So they've done the lion's share of their work. They've identified the general parcels, properties that will be required. I'll talk a little bit more about the specific properties related to SDIC, but I can say there's only one fee title acquisition anticipated, and that's not in SDIC. The rest is all easements, and of course we have prior rights and easements of various shapes and sizes, which I'll talk about more. That will hopefully help streamline that process. But so the cores essentially, they will still be working on this in a sense. When they do the design, they'll help us perfect those boundaries of individual easements that they need to move forward with construction. But they've done their share of heavy lifting, and so it moves to us. And we've talked a lot about the work that will fall on us. And as you know, Amber Ayers and I have been working diligently to prepare us for the real estate phase. Some of this work in these lists comes later, but we continue to, we're finishing up on our gap analysis to best understand like how well positioned we are with our current real estate portfolio. We will still need to, despite the fact that we have a lot of easements, we have been looking at the adequacy of those easements from a geospatial context as well as a legal context, the limits to which those, the rights that all those easements provide. In some cases, they are very, very clearly provide us O&M access, but they don't necessarily always provide for new construction or expansion of the existing system. So those are all the sorts of details that we've been working on, and we'll be providing that to you in the near future. So during the, just to clarify some items on this, at the end, when we require all the easements, we'll hand them over to the Corps, and then we'll certify. We will have title insurance for those easements, and we'll hand them over to the Corps, and they will verify those, and then they'll be ready to move forward for construction. During construction, we'll be relocating utilities, public facilities. That I just want to point out the relocation assistance services in that line, in case it's not clear, that really only applies to fee title real estate instruments. So we have to purchase a property, and we have to relocate the owner of that property or their assets to another site. In other words, to make them whole. But again, there are no anticipated fee titles acquisitions in SDIC. And then at the end of the entire project, then we submit a huge package, probably actually by phase. We'll submit reimbursement packages, or I should say crediting packages, so that we get credit for all this work that we did towards our 35% cost share. This is sort of this is the distribution of tax lots and properties throughout the 4 districts by land area. And when we're done with the gap analysis, we'll also have the numbers so you can see how those the dollar value of those are distributed as well. You can see there's of course the Penn 2 levy raise is drives a substantial amount of relocations and easements. This is just a quick overview of the footprint. You've seen this footprint before, and this is not necessarily sensitive data, but the reason we're having executive session later is to just be able to speak freely about some of the challenges that we expect in each district in our acquisition. Here is SDIC. I think you folks are all aware of where the heavy lifting is in SDIC. So I'm not going to read this entire slide. This is in your memo, but it was a good way to quantify the level of effort that we've been exerting so far in trying to get these answers for you. So we've been going through existing deeds and easements. We've been pulling title reports for all the tax lots in the current expected project footprint. Then we had a land surveyor do easements and encumbrances analysis to identify our prior rights and existing easements, and then having Miller Nash outside counsel do further analysis on that to substantiate that. And so we're in the final throes of that, and then we can provide you with a gap analysis. So what is the gap analysis going to tell us? It's going to tell us where we have more perfect and less perfect easements, and that simply will speak to, that's going to speak to just the ease of negotiations. In some cases where we have more prior rights or substantial easement documentation that is very clear, we expect negotiations to go smoothly, and we hope that we will be able to acquire those easements at lower cost. Where we have less perfect easements or non-existent easements, obviously we're going to have to, negotiation could be more difficult and will cost more. And I say cost more, I'm hoping that just means that it'll be around true market value rather than, anything more exorbitant. The Corps' real estate plan of 13 million that I cited earlier, that's basically assumed that we had very few easements. And so that's a good thing. It means that we should be able to get credit for everything that we negotiate. The Corps' policy is to pay us for 100% of market value, and their policy allows them to pay up to 100 or give us credit for up to 110% of market value. So that's also good news. And obviously in some cases we are going to pay less than market value, so we'll have more credit available. The other good news is that I'm going to give you an example. If an easement is expected to cost $100,000 and we're able to successfully negotiate that easement for $25,000, we still get credit for the $100,000 in our cost share credit. So that's extremely good news. And again, if it were to go beyond market value, like 110%, we'll still get credit up to that amount. So the final numbers, that $13 million number, as I understand it, is still in flux. The Corps recognizes that years have passed or will have passed by the time they give us the final real estate package. So that number could be slightly higher, but that also means that the creditable value will also be higher. And then I just put a note here that there's a 35% contingency for real estate. So you go, well, they only pay up to 110%. There's obviously other costs involved in the real estate acquisition. So, so that's where we go beyond the actual fair market value. So that's a lot of information. A lot of it is actually, I think we've passed along, but it is a lot to absorb. So happy to take any questions before we move into executive session. So if you have any questions that are specific to maybe more sensitive issues, we'll save those for the executive session. But these,
Mark, I just want to clarify that we have not noticed an executive session for this meeting. I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding, but I was under the impression that wasn't needed.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the. Thank you for reminding me of that. I guess the good news is the reason for that is that we actually don't have an expectation of particularly difficult easements we don't actually have particularly difficult negotiations expected for the easements in SDIC. So as you can see here, these are the major landowners, and we have obviously a great partnership with the Port of Portland. We don't expect anything to be particularly controversial, and there's no particularly difficult private landowners that we expect. We do know that we were going to need to partner closely with Troutdale Outlet Mall. They don't actually have technically any easements that we currently expect due to the nature of the right of way. But as we can see there, our work butts up against them and it could impact their business. So we just need to be prepared to be responsive to their needs, even if we don't physically need an easement. So these are.
Let me know, Mark. Let me know if there's anything we can do with Troutdale Outlet Mall, because that's time equities and they're a little interesting to deal with sometimes.
Sure. No, I appreciate that, Tanny. We have, and just to speak to that, we've been most of our discussions so far have been with Multnomah County because of the Graham Road right of way and their needs on that. And, but we do have Troutdale Outlet Malls owners on the list of landowners that we need to contact in the near future just to start getting them up to speed ahead of any negotiations. But thank you. I'm going to jump backward and talk about a subject that, again, is in your board memo, pretty clearly articulated. I just wanted to offer an opportunity to answer any questions about that. I don't expect this to be much of a concern in SDIC, but I put it out there just in the event that we get new information and we do find that this is relevant. So in the board memo, it talked about contingency planning for early real estate acquisitions. And what that means is, well, actually, I'll back up and say we had an example in a different district where we noticed some real estate transactions that could have affected our ability to implement the project. For instance, there can be market conditions that would drive the prices to go up. There could be turnover of land to a party that plans to develop a footprint that we need for something like a flood wall or a levee enhancement, something that's physically not going to be possible if someone develops that land. And so it just came to our attention that we need to talk about this with our boards. We don't, as I said earlier, we don't plan to or need to, if everything goes well, purchase anything before the Corps gives us the notice to proceed letter to purchase real estate. But we also want to be proactive and identify any parcels that come up and the situations or assumptions have changed. And obviously we wouldn't want to jump the gun on anything where unless there is extreme risk or opportunity provided by purchasing an easement early. Some of those factors are listed below. Obviously, public parcels are much less likely to be developed, for instance, than a private property. There are factors such as whether it's a permanent easement, a temporary or construction or access easement that could be occluded by property developments. And then, of course, another factor that would weigh in on whether or not we would even take the risk of buying a property early would be whether or not we have future needs for that property, regardless of whether or not the core project gets implemented. So, for instance, this would apply to, given a very salient example for Penn 1, the railroad embankment. That is new property that needs to be, or new easements that need to be acquired for construction. And even if the core project wasn't funded and authorized, we would still need to deal with that certification issue. Likewise, in SDIC, that northwest corner of the district has substantial levee improvements and a pump station. We still need to make sure we have the easements in place to be able to implement those, regardless of whether or not the project moves forward. And other areas such as Penn 2 levee raise, it's a substantial project and we might not have the capacity to do that without federal funding. So we would probably do whatever we could to avoid buying early easements, because that is not something we know that we need in the future and we can support. So those are the sort of decision factors that would go into that. And we'll have a little bit more granularity on that in November. We'll look more closely at things in SDIC as well. But again, as I said earlier, we don't really expect anything of that sort. We don't have any fee title acquisitions expected in SDIC. And so, and then the other important point I wanted to make is obviously as we get closer to that real estate acquisition phase, the need to buy anything at risk lowers, because we're at the heels of our acquisition phase. So we might just find a way to mitigate any impacts and speak to the landowners if we do see any transactions going on that could affect our project. So again, I'll turn to this slide, and again, as you see, there's a lot of the port partners and other public partners, public agency partners that own the lands that we need to affect this work. We don't anticipate there being any serious issues. In some cases, in most cases, for instance, the Georgia Pacific, James River, Fort James, those landowners have very small portions. The land that we need is more on the levee itself to address low spots and widening, but the widening's on the inside, so it wouldn't actually affect those landowners. So those are the sorts of things we're looking at to help us assess whether or not there's any risk. So certainly if there's any information that board members have on any risks that we haven't anticipated, that's always welcome, and we'll investigate those. But currently, I think in SDIC, the real estate picture looks pretty good.
Hey, Mark, can I make a comment with the port hat on? That, just a couple items here is, I realize, I think all this is easements, but TRIP is still a super fund designated property. And so it always makes for more challenges in terms of acquisition, even easements. So just keep that in mind. And something you said about, undeveloped, well, the port actually develops real estate. So some of that is planned for, some of it is open space, but some is planned, like the Fairview lot is planned for development. So not sure that's entirely accurate. And then the Bonneville Power, I've done extensive work with Bonneville in siting a new future substation at TRIP, and also a recent deal where we're trying to get the 40-mile loop through there, and their ownership of lot 12. And they sold the Able Grid. We had to wait until that transaction went through because they didn't want to grant any construction easements because it triggered NEPA. So you might want to make sure that you're consulting with Bonneville Power if you're going to do any construction, because that's going to trigger their own NEPA process, and it's going to delayed that project a year. So just a couple pieces from our own experience I just wanted to share with you.
That's really helpful, Ken. And I was aware of some of when we had a meeting with you and other port personnel about 2 years ago. We did understand that you had some development concerns in that area, and so it probably behooves us to have some discussions on that in the next 6 months or so to have a firm footing before we start PED. And with respect to the Bonneville Power, I do appreciate that, and I looked in the Corps' cost schedule, and there's their risk register, and there was some acknowledgement of risk surrounding some of the high voltage line towers, base towers and stuff, and where they're close to the project footprint. So we will definitely be reaching out to them along with other landowners that the Corps hasn't explicitly reached out to yet. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Mark. And let me know if there's anything I can do to help out. Happy to facilitate any meetings with Bonneville Power. And one other item, and I'm sure you've accounted for it because it says including the mitigation site. The mitigation site is also a core nexus in terms of we had to do mitigation, 84 acres of mitigation. If you touch that, it's a 3-for-1 replacement. And so, and it's a core requirement, other side of the core. So, and a federal process.
Yeah. Thanks. We're aware of that, but obviously we want to engage the Corps more on details. That mitigation site actually drove the Corps at the last minute to add some contingency funds to the final plan, because they acknowledged that there's possibility that they actually went out and did additional delineations to figure out whether or not they expected the mitigation plantings to creep into our project work zone, and brought up just those issues. But obviously more information is better. So we'll probably reach out and advise our core partners once they stand their team back up.
Thanks, Ken.
Hey, Mark, I had a question about some of the acquisition processes. When it comes to the district's power to negotiate and obtain these easements and right-of-ways, where are we at as far as any sort of preparation for necessary condemnation of these easements?
It's a good question. I'll probably so let Han comment on this if she has anything additional to share after I'm done. But
okay.
You know, our hope and our expectation is that we are able to do everything cooperatively. The Corps has, in our real estate capabilities assessment, they verified that all districts have the ability to exercise eminent domain as needed. Our reply was yes, but that is not a desirable option for multiple reasons, both politically as well as it is a big schedule risk as well. So, but that again is part of our part of the information that's going to come out of this gap analysis, identifying any sites that that we need to engage sooner on than later, and do some preparation work before we get all the way to the end of PED.
All right, great. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was part of the conversation instead of just 100% market transaction there. So thanks.
Well, I'll just add that we've queued up potential outside services to do market evaluation. We have also queued up outside counsel with the potential need to do condemnation if we had to. So they're queued up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Annalise, anything? Okay. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Of course, if there's any additional questions or information you have, we are open ears. Thanks for this opportunity.
Okay. I think you're next.
I am next. Let's get my other shifting gears. Something that is hopefully more straightforward. Okay. So can you all see my screen now? Okay, great. Well, I heard that there was going to be a follow-on or a discussion later about the gate tower, and it was very timely because we just received our summary findings from an alternatives analysis that we contracted our on-call water resource engineer, ESA, to conduct. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background to get everyone up to speed on the gate tower. I'm going to try to move through this fairly quickly, give you a chance to chat or allow more time for us back on schedule. I think everyone recognizes the gate tower. I'm going to talk a little bit about background. I'm going to talk about the analysis findings, proposed next steps. First off, I'll just back it way up. This is the area in Blue Lake Basin that all the drainage which passes through the gate tower and into SDIC. And this is the location of the gate tower, right on the cross levee between MCDD and SDIC. The gate tower allows drainage from the Blue Lake Basin to pass into SDIC, where it can be discharged through the SDIC pump station. The gate tower also shuts off flow in the event of a breach in either district that would obviously impact the other district. So it provides, it sort of contains any perimeter flooding and reduces the impacts to other districts. Hopefully you can make this out. This is from the original drawings for the cross levee, and the gate tower is part of a system. There's the gate tower on the western end. You'll see a platform that doesn't actually exist. For some reason, the Corps did not end up building that. And that was designed to provide landward access to the gate tower. Currently, if it was operable, you would have to, and the system to the west was flooded, you would have to get on a boat to actuate the valve and climb up that tower. There's the gate tower on the western side. It shuts off flow with 2 slide gates on the 2 42-inch culverts that go through the MCDD SDIC cross levee. Those culverts are CMP or corrugated metal pipe. And on the eastern end, it was constructed with 2 flap valves that basically allow the flow to push the flap valves open and allow flow through under normal operations. But during a flood, if for some reason there was a breach on the SDIC side, those flap valves would shut and prevent flow from backing up in the event. So it's sort of a belt and suspenders. It would duplicate, passively duplicate the function of the gate tower on the west side. Those flap valves were removed because the excess sedimentation on the eastern side and No Name Creek, they sort of interfered with the operation of the flap valves. So I think this is all just to follow on. Okay, so the project, obviously everyone is aware, this project is in the Levee Ready Columbia Intergovernmental Agreement. The project is out of compliance with the O&M manual because the gates inoperable, and the flap gates were removed. So while the culverts are partially blocked, there is still free flow through there, particularly when there's head pressure, like elevated water levels on the western side that drives flow through, particularly in the rainy season. Last work that was completed had to be abandoned because of divers' concerns about safety issues. The structure itself is questionable condition. It's wood pile structures, and so it is, the structural integrity is in question. So this is one of 3 projects that are being moved forward by Levee Ready Columbia to continue to show good faith to FEMA that we're meeting our requirements to recertify the entire system. This gate tower is one project that was considered a deferred maintenance issue by the Corps. It was not included in the Corps' recommended plan, and it also the Corps' final plan did not emphasize cross levee features as it did in alternative 4. So they focused their efforts on just making the outer perimeter levee impregnable. So that's why it still landed in our court to continue to work on this. The LRC board agreed to fund recertification design through 60%. And so as we moved to put together an RFP to do this design work, we realized there was still some gaps in knowledge that would help us refine our RFP to make it most efficient and effective. So it built on the alternative study we contracted, built on the work of the MCDD and SDIC drainage master plans. They both had different perspectives. And so this study looked at all the possible alternatives and provided costs, and looked at other pros and cons, other risks, opportunities for a final solution. And our goal was, because there was 6 alternatives out there, was to provide information to narrow the starting alternatives for a future designer. Those 6 alternatives sort of boiled down to 2 variations of the following: to repair the existing structure, replace the existing structures, and then to decommission the cross levee gate system and route drainage alternatively. Some of these things have been talked about, but nobody had fully explored it to understand the costs and the benefits of various solutions. And I will say, in terms of repairing the existing structure, obviously, I also noted that the gate tower itself is structurally unsound, and so that's sort of exploring an alternative that is not necessarily feasible within all the components of the system. But we looked at both the gate tower and the pipe that goes through the levee to see what the costs would be, and we considered rehabbing. Even will the pipe be okay as is, or will it need to be rehabbed, or will it need to be replaced? So this summarizes those design problems. I think I've cited all these things. One of the big recommendations that ESA provided was that before they agreed with us that before we put out an RFP for design, we should have a better sense of what the condition of those culverts is, because that will inform what we can do to the structures that control those culverts on either end. And so the other recommendation is that the sedimentation on the east side in No Name Creek be dredged at least partially, so that the level of the sediment on the downstream or receiving side of the culverts is at least at or below the elevation. At least we have a low flow channel at the least, to allow the flow through the culverts to gravity flow through there, and so that we don't experience back sedimentation into the pipes once we've done any kind of pipe inspection. We'll be releasing the final copy of the report. It has lots of tables that allow you to dive deep into this if you like, but you can see here some facts and figures. These are also in your memo, where I kind of bracketed the figures that they provided. The first figure on these ranges they're a little bit different than in your design memo, because the design memo provides a very low cost. So it was like minus 40% of their expected value or estimate. And then they provided a high cost. So I just put it in for budgeting purposes, more realistic to use an expected cost and then the high cost value. So you can see that the decommissioning alternatives were the most expensive overall, and probably in the middle range is where we're likely to, I should say the middle range is where we would have to do open cut excavation because of the pipe condition. But cost is not the only criteria, and so these are a number of criteria that were scored to inform us of, for ESA to provide a technical recommendation. And so we looked at all the implementation costs. We looked at constructability issues, permitting issues, and core approval, and all these factors. And we arrived at a scoring. I'll show you a picture of that, a little snapshot from the report. But the preferred alternative was alternative 4, which, as you can see here, would involve replacement of the existing gate structures with a slide gate in the middle of the levee, which is very similar to 142nd Avenue. That addresses a lot of safety concerns in operation, access concerns, and so forth. That doesn't necessarily dictate whether you can, you may be able to slip line up the pipe if necessary, versus having to do open cut while you're doing this. But again, those things would be explored further in design, and ESA just provided some best case, some various estimates for the various situations. Again, inspecting the pipe is going to be critical to understanding how we move forward with these various alternatives. And once we inspect the pipe, we'll be able to re-rack once we have a little bit more information. And obviously we can, if for some reason, well, let me back up. The pipes are at about the end of their life cycle, and so it is very likely that we'll need to slip line the culverts. So when you look at the report, probably best to focus on the slip lining or the open cut excavation options. And here are some numbers. Again, all of this is detailed fully in the report, and for those that want to dive deep, it will be there. But I think a summary was pretty critical to helping understand. So again, you can see the weighting criteria here. Cost is obviously is in there, but it's weighted evenly with these other factors. And when we obtain the results of the pipe inspection, we will be coming back. We'll be going back to the Levy Ready Board so that they can decide which alternatives they'll be able to re-rack. Obviously the technical recommendation will be based on this, but if they want to, if they feel that certain criteria will need to be weighed differently, they can certainly inject that. But these are the 6 alternatives summed up, and then the various summary rankings. You can see here, alternative 4 was at 35. Alternative 2, which was to replace the existing tower and gates, received 34 points, and then we started to see some differentiation. It's down to 30 for repaired the gates in an existing tower. And then the decommissioning alternatives ranked very low because of the many challenges in decommissioning those systems, as well as to reroute the flow through a gravity force main, which is what would have to happen. Flow would either be routed to Fairview Lake or to directly to the Columbia, and so we'd have to get through the levee. And there's a lot of permitting involved in that, and which drives cost. So I think I've kind of indicated all this information. With respect to our proposed next steps, obviously at some point Levy Ready Columbia will pick up and move forward with the 30% design. We expect that to be next fiscal year after we're able to complete the pipe inspection. After the completion of this alternative study, we just didn't have enough time to address in-water work periods and permitting in order to be able to get this pipe inspection done. We also realized the need to do the dredging before we do the pipe inspection. So we hope to be able to complete those activities during next summer's in-water work period, and then be able to move forward in the fall with some decision-making and then contracting of the RFP. The costs for the RFP will be, again, would be borne by the Levy Ready Columbia effort initially, and the cost of the maintenance and inspection, we expect, well, the dredging project has been built into existing SDIC budgets, and the cleaning and CCT inspection, obviously some of these issues will be driven by your ownership discussion, but we expect it to cost about $150,000. That has currently not been budgeted. That sounds like a large cost, but it is in-water work. We will be required to put in coffer dams. We ESA reached out to some contractors to come up with some creative solutions to minimize the cost. So this is actually lower than a sort of a first guess. And so this is the expected cost. So again, I'll just, and then so after the inspection will be, and we get more information, we'll re-rack the criteria based on the information in the report and move forward with an RFP. So I have the long-term objectives in terms of the ultimate designing and construction, but again, I think we're focused on the things that we're that you need to be aware of as SDI board and the costs that are relevant. But and then obviously, hopefully, we would have a certification project completed based on this timeline. Here's another view of our bucolic gate tower. And I'll just open it up for any questions.
Mark, as it sits now, the drainage pipes the water would be coming east, correct? Into No Name Creek?
Generally, the water comes east into No Name Creek. There's been anecdotal evidence that during high water events, like in 1996, the water moved westward into MCDD, providing some storage. We don't have any concrete information about just how much storage there is available to SDIC in the event that that system has internal drainage issues during a major high water event or a breach. But so that's one of the recommendations the ESA provided as well in the future to get more information. But yes, generally the water flows from west to east.
Okay.
If you don't mind, let me just add a comment there. Mark is correct. Drainage is there primarily to allow the Blue Lake watershed to flow eastward. But in the SDIC drainage master plan, we did study the benefits that the SDIC has for the same pipes, and they do exist. And it is for flood storage purposes. And we did some calculations of what that entails. So
Wasn't that like 1.7 inches, or I believe?
it was not a lot of elevation. It was in terms of inches. Honestly, I have to go back to the report. But obviously a couple of inches is a lot in a very flat space over in the Blue Lake. Was a disc golf course over there. So, but yeah, so there is benefit to SDIC. We would have to do some more digging to figure out how much that benefit exists versus what MCDDs, but clearly the pipes are for normal times, not for large storm events, benefits MCDD more than SDIC.
Okay. And do you guys have any assumptions of what you think the cost split would be on something like this, percentage wise?
I can jump in there just to, I think maybe put a little bit of one little piece in there that Mark did touch on. So currently this work, not some of the deferred maintenance for cleaning before the actual inspection, but that work is being funded by Levy Ready Columbia. This was identified in the Levy Ready Columbia intergovernmental agreement. So all of this work up to the 60% is being funded through Levy Ready Columbia budgeting through fiscal year 24. And the expectation is that that will then move to the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District's responsibility to move forward. And the actual capital construction of this has been identified as part of that bond measure, so future bond measure that hopefully the voters will support. So as far as funding or the actual cost, capital costs, I think Mark has some estimates there, but as far as a cost split, it is one number that is to be funded through the bond and then shared through the whole region. And so that is why we're committed to continue bringing these updates to MCDD and the SDIC boards so that you know all the great work that Mark, Bill, and the engineering team have been able to move forward and really make some huge strides on this. But as far as the sort of split and responsibility for the capital work and the design work, that is currently LRC, and then LRC moving into the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District.
I guess I'm just wondering, is it really something that we want to do to that extent? I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is it something we really want to do?
Well, I think with Colin's point, that's going to be up to the LRC and then the Urban District Board to decide. And Penny, I
Okay.
know that you are on that board and among some of the other members of this board. So hopefully you'll be really thinking about that in the next couple of years.
Okay. Right.
And it does remain a project that is needed for our operation and maintenance plan. And Army Corps of Engineers reviews that operation and maintenance manual. And that manual, we need to be able to operate anything annually. So that's still a requirement. It's still an issue as far as our participation in PL 8499, the Rehabilitation Inspection Program, and it remains a certification issue. So we still have a number of, beyond the hydraulic or, the actual function of it, we have some outside pressure to make sure that we take care of this.
Does the board have any questions for staff at this point?
Hi, sorry to be participating so much on this particular call. I just do have a quick question about emergency plans for this relating to like potential liability. Since it's non-functioning right now, what's the plan to mitigate any sort of cross levee water flows during an emergency?
Yeah, let me take a stab at that, Brian. What we would have to do, depending on where the emergency exists, if the SDIC levee is breached and the MC levees are intact, we would have to close off the drain pipe from water going westward. So the flat valves that you saw in the graphic Mark shared are not on the pipes currently because there's too much sediment in Salmon Creek. And so that's part of the dredging work that would have to be done. And it's honestly part of maintenance, under ditch maintenance. This is a creek, not necessarily a ditch. So we would either A, have to remove that sediment right away and then put the valves back in, or B, use another device of some sort. There's in construction, there's a lot of companies use pipe plugs, if you will. It's sort of like a wine bottle.
Right.
So you just kind of plug the pipe. So divers probably would have to do that, or some other measures. So there are tools out there to do that. If the MCD side breaches and we want to protect SDIC, a similar type of exercise, we'd likely put in some pipe plugs in the drain pipes, probably with divers, just to protect SDIC.
Okay, and I mean, all right, that sort of answers that. I mean, is that something that's in like the emergency plans? Because I don't know, I'm just thinking if this big water is coming down the river and we get a breach, I mean, how quickly does this kind of stuff get deployed?
Yeah, so this would be a little bit ad hoc. That's not necessarily in a formal document per se, but I mean, that's why you have our staff, honestly. That's, right. We know what to do in that situation, have an idea for that, and it's just a matter of getting the right supplies. So unfortunately, you can't look at a document. You'll just have to rely on professional judgment at that point.
Right, yeah, I mean, from a liability point, I'm just thinking it's, we know that it's deficient. It's foreseeable that there's gonna be a potential issue related to it. And so just looking forward to some sort of mitigation to understand exactly what's gonna happen, I think would put everybody in some sort of more at ease about potential liabilities for, I mean, basically not maintaining a structure that has been identified as a critical piece of infrastructure. All right, that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Yep, fair enough.
And I just, I could just add a quick note to that. I know that we've been looking at, thanks to some of the work that the Corps did during the PMLS, we were looking at refining some of our emergency flood closures and having like a more practical sort of quick reference card or something like that for each flood closure, including some of the sandbag and HESCO closures in some of the areas where we have low spots. So that's certainly something that we could, that has been a forum that we've periodically visited to develop some documents to provide guidance in an emergency. And that's certainly one that we could add to the list.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. We are at new business. Woohoo. Got 2 minutes to spare here. Anyone? Ken, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay. Annalise, no? Okay, I guess with that, we will just go ahead and adjourn this board meeting of the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you all. Nice job, everyone. Thank you.
Kenny, thanks for filling in.
You bet.